Well, hi, this video is making sure we understand the powers of Congress. On your study guide, you will note that there are three main categories that we look at. And so I'm going to be talking more about these categories and the powers of Congress. Now, you are welcome to watch this cheesy intro video that I love. The link is there, but I'm not going to do that on this video, otherwise, it gets kind of long. So if you want to stop and look at that video, you can. I am going to skip some of the review questions that go with that video, but you are more than welcome to look at those and again, look at those different terms for what we use, which I'm going to be bringing up here. So if you get out your study guide, you will see that one of the things we need to know about are these delegated powers. And delegated powers is just like it sounds. It is powers that are specifically mentioned in the Constitution. And we've looked at Article 1, Section 8, and you can see all of those clauses 1 through 18 about the powers that are granted specifically to Congress. We also call those enumerated powers. The reason enumerated is if you look at the root word of enumerated, the root word is numerous. There's a lot of powers that Congress has specifically delegated, specifically stated, specifically given to them in the Constitution. Now, those categories are what we're going to be looking at in our notes. So the first category I want to talk about is borrowing. Borrowing is just like it sounds. In order for government to be able to implement the programs that it needs to do, they might have to borrow money if they don't bring enough money in through taxing. So because of that, it's very specific in Article 1, Section 8, that Congress does have the power to borrow money. And we are really good at it. As a country, we are currently at 27 trillion for borrowing money. So that's one of the reasons why we study government, because it's really expensive. And we as taxpayers, we're going to have to pay back that borrowed money. But it is very specific in the Constitution that government can borrow money so they can pay for programs that government needs to run what people have demanded. The second power that is delegated falls into the category of taxing. Yes, the federal government can tax you. And there are a lot of taxes that we pay, which is one of the reasons why we study government. Government's expensive. So we collect money from all sorts of ways. We collect it, of course, in your income tax. We collect it in duties, imposts, excises. Anytime you need to pay a fee, that is basically a form of a tax. And the reason we tax is to pay for all those programs that you want. The third power that's delegated is called the commerce power. Commerce means business. And we've had a chamber of commerce. That means they work with businesses to promote and expand trade. And that's what our federal government is supposed to do as well. Our federal government is supposed to regulate and promote trade. So things like having copyrights and patents and trademarks, things like having a good road system, things like having a post office, those all contribute to a strong economy and strong commerce, good trade. Please make sure you note that any type of dealings with transportation, our railroad system, our river system, our interstate road system, our air traffic system, those are all part of commerce powers, because those commerce powers do definitely help businesses. The next category of a delegated power is currency, and currency means making sure our money is what we say it is. So yes, in Article 1, Section 8, we do go after counterfeiters because we have to make sure our money has value and people are willing to take our money, our currency, worldwide. You see a term there you may not be familiar with. We have what we call fiat money. We do not have money backed by the gold standard. We do not have money backed by silver. There is not enough money in the entire world for all of the money that the United States has created in its wealth. So we have paper fake money. That $20 bill isn't worth anything, but you think it is because we call that fiat money. The government has declared it has a $20 value. We believe it and accept it. We believe our economy is strong. And so by fiat, you use the $20 bill and believe you can get goods or services with that $20 bill. That's one of the reasons why we go after counterfeiters. Next is the bankruptcy power. This does not mean the government can go bankrupt. If the government goes bankrupt, the government's over. This is bankruptcy power for you, businesses, individuals who can't pay their bills. So what happens is you go to court, the judge looks at your situation, they figure out with your assets what you can pay, what you can't pay, and you start fresh and anew. So this is a power that was put into our Constitution because of the debtor prisons that we had experienced under the British. Next, the war powers. And the war powers is not just a congressional duty. The war powers is also shared with the president because the president is the commander in chief. The only group that can declare war is Congress. But Congress can't declare war unless the commander in chief is willing to put the troops out there. That's a great check and balance with each other. So this war power is shared with the president, and the war power has all of the control over the Navy, the Army, the militia, the National Guards, and yes, now Space Force. The next category of powers are what we call implied powers. These are not actually specifically stated in the Constitution. The reason we can do this is because Article 1, Section 8, Clause 18, which says the government can make any necessary and proper laws. We call this the elastic clause. So some of you are filling out your federal grant for college, and you're trying to get a Pell Grant or guaranteed student loan. That's nowhere in Article 1, Section 8, Clauses 1 through 17, but people think it's necessary and proper to have a strong educational system. And so that falls under Article 1, Section 8, Clause 18, this elastic clause. And it's implied that government can do that. Same thing for some of you who might use the Federal Agricultural Services over by Yellow Smoke Park. Those are implied powers. Nowhere in the Constitution does it say we should have a Department of Agriculture. It's not there, but it's implied, it's not specifically stated, that that's probably necessary and proper for us to be able to run agriculture and commerce in the United States. So if you've never seen that Article 1, Section 8, Clause 18, I'd like to call that to your attention here. The Congress shall have power to make all laws which shall be necessary and proper for carrying into execution the foregoing powers. Those powers listed in Article 1, Section 8, Clauses 1 through 17. And so that's where we get those implied powers. Now, this is some example of some implied powers. So we want to make sure we can borrow money. Well, who's going to watch that? The Federal Reserve System. In addition, another example of an implied power to regulate commerce. That's in Article 1, Section 8, but it's implied that we have a federal minimum wage. It's implied that we want to have programs to ban discrimination in workplaces and public facilities. So those are some examples of implied powers. Now, one of the things you need to be aware of is when we interpret the Constitution, we have strict constructionist versus liberal constructionist. A strict constructionist says, hey, it should only be what's in Article 1, Section 8, Clauses 1 through 17. We shouldn't be expanding this. We shouldn't have a Department of Education on a federal level. That's a state power. We shouldn't have a Department of Housing and Urban Development. That should be a state power if the state even wants to do it. A liberal constructionist says, you know what? I think that's implied. And so that's why we have all of these federal programs that aren't actually listed in the Constitution. And that's why most of the bills are now passed under Article 1, Section 8, Clause 18, the necessary and proper clause. The last section I want to talk about are non-legislative powers. This is that third category. They're not specifically stated in Article 1, Section 8, but they are in Article 1. We know that Congress has the power of impeachment. That is stated in Article 1. This means that Congress can impeach the president or Supreme Court judges. Next is oversight and investigation. Oversight and investigation can be confusing. We know from the committee system that Congress can have committees. What are they looking at? Well, those committees are an oversight of the executive branch or an investigation of non-executive problems. So when the House of Representatives committees were looking at President Trump's involvement with Russia, that is oversight. That's an investigation of the executive branch. A simple investigation is anything non-presidential, non-executive. So if we are looking at the effects of the Gulf War syndrome on vets, that would be an investigation. The last two, authorization and appropriation, deal with money. Authorization is the money available to be spent, and appropriation is how much money you actually get. So if you're sitting down with your family and you're budgeting a trip to Disney World and you say, we're going to authorize $5,000 for our Disney World trip, and then your motor blows on your car. Well, where are you going to pull that money from? Because I'm pretty sure you didn't authorize a blown motor. Well, it's going to come from your vacation fund. So that $5,000 goes down to $1,000. You now have $1,000 appropriated money available to be spent on your vacation. You're going to Okoboji. So authorization is how much money could be spent or the budget. Appropriation is the money actually allotted. Every bill has an authorization, how much we'd like to spend, but appropriation is how much you actually get. So when a Congress member says, I authorized all of this stuff, they might have, but what really matters is how much is appropriated, how much money is in the palm of your hand. Don't forget to do your study guide notes. And if you are confused, always think delegated, specifically stated, Article 1, Section 8, implied, necessary and proper, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 18, non-legislative, we're not making laws, but these are things that are stated in the Constitution.